Welcome everyone to Awesome Truth, a wrestling book club. I'm your host, Steve Semino, and with me as always is my co-host, Walt Schwenk. Hey, Walters.
Hello, Steven. How's it going?
My friend, it is going pretty well. It's fine. It's
All
funny
right.
how my my response changes based on whether we read a book. You think the books would be more of a slog, and so I'd be tired after we're about to do a book episode, but I feel like it's more rewarding to talk about a book. When we watch one episode of a subpar documentary series, I think that's when the real malaise sets in, and you go, "Ugh, gotta talk about this now. Gotta talk about evil."
Yeah, the books are certainly more an investment, whereas the documentary series that on the WWE Network's offering, that's pretty much the definition of low-hanging fruit.
And you'd think we would, I mean, we've talked about these so many times already, and you think we would have done in the death. You think there wouldn't be more to say. And in some ways there isn't. I think we'll get into that there isn't some new things to say, but they keep making them, you know? Like, if they keep making them, we are sort of professionally obligated to watch them and comment on them. And it's just that the ecosystem in which these documentary series operate is interesting, I guess, is the best way to interesting in the most bland, boring way possible.
I mean, the greatest overview is for all this is just like it's another biographical docuseries highlighting characters. Again, like this is the same show we've done and seen in like 100 different ways, and now we're just the slight slant is we're talking about bad guy villains.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, a little bit.
Or characters. I should say not. I mean, villains, yes, but like the characters. But really, it's like they're just bio pieces. Like, all right, cool.
I mean, we'll obviously welcome everyone to Awesome Truth. This is the show where we talk about books and documentaries and pro wrestling. And the hook here, well, I think the why we're doing this, obviously, is for Sasha Banks. Like, obviously, you know from the name of the episode, we're talking about WWE Evil, the Peacock series that came out a few months ago. But the reason that we decided to do this particular episode is we want to talk Sasha, and there's a Sasha episode, and we've never really talked about Sasha Banks before. So it is good kismet in that regard that Sasha is certainly in the news. But I think I went into this thinking maybe there'd be some, unlocking of her as a person or her psyche or whatever. And I guess there sort of is, but at the same time, like you said, this is not a probing look at the character, the person, the idea of being a bad guy. Like it's not more probing than anything else that we've ever seen on the network. It's all the same shit, different package.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice like highlight reel of her greatest moments as a WWE character. And I'm like, wow, those were some great moments 8 years ago.
Yeah. Man, that Bailey match from 7 years ago sure was good, wasn't it?
Right, and it's like, yeah, like a lot. Look, I will say like a lot. So they did dig a little deeper. They showed a lot of. I'm not going to remember the independent.
The Boston promotion she worked for.
Yeah, chaos wrestling. Like all that stuff was like pretty interesting to see. But like, for as long as those segments usually go, which is like 2 minutes of backstory, and it's like. But ultimately, you just squint. It's like, is this 24? Is this Chronicle? Is this Is it WWE Evil or WWE Evil?
I think it's WWE Evil, but yours is kind of, I don't know. Yours is a little more like Attitude Era extreme style capitalization and word smooshing. But I would at least be a little. It'd be harder to read, but I think it would be slightly catchier. I don't know.
It's easier to slur.
Yeah, because the E, you can't do the two E's. Like, I mean, I have trouble saying WWE, enunciating anyway, but adding another E word after that is very annoying.
Yeah. So, anyways, whatever the hell this one's called. Look, the good news is there's a lot to dissect and unpack with the topic at hand in currently May 23rd, 2022 of this recording. We have to take this because it's not coming out for a bit. But
yeah, we're recording this in advance because I'm getting married in the very near future, in mere days, and so we're banking this one a tad. But also, we wanted to talk about it because Sasha's Sasha walked out, a week ago, and so this was very relevant to what's going on. And I imagine even if in a week and in 2 weeks when this episode comes out, let's say she's back in the company, then like the ramifications of this are still going to be being felt. Like I find it hard. I know Vince forgives very frequently, and they go scorched earth on people and then they welcome them back. But I find it hard to believe that in 2 weeks this will have been resolved. Like they seem very adamant in punishing her and Naomi for this transgression.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, as if you were to watch WWE Evil, you'll know like this is not the first time this performer has done this.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously with all the reports coming out of what happened, why, and motivations and the repercussions, and everybody's giving their 2 cents on it, you forget like, oh wait, yeah, she did this before, didn't she? And like that one was a little bit, I guess, handled better, but I guess we'll talk more about that instance of her career. But like, yeah, she's now established a pattern of like just being unhappy and like just like not wanting to do this, and this time it's a little bit more chaotic.
Yeah, and it's such a weird situation too, because on one hand I don't blame her. Like we've talked a million times on this show, if you read books, listen to people talk, you know how debilitating wrestling can be, even on this more modern, more condensed schedule. Like it's not, I don't think they're burning the candle the way they used to, even probably a decade ago. But it's still exhausting. It's still, getting beat up every night, and the ideas are still as stupid as they ever were. Like it's never good. It sometimes is transcendent and mostly is bad. And Sasha's been in some great matches and she's been in some stupid feuds. She's gone nowhere a lot of the time. She's one of their most recognized and decorated female wrestlers, maybe ever at this point, weirdly enough. But she still gets, 8 months of the year she's doing some bullshit that doesn't matter. And join the club, like so is everybody else. Like everyone who's not named Roman Reigns and probably Becky Lynch is carrying some bullshit every now and then. But but does that mean you just walk out when you don't like the creative? Like it's just, and like you said, when you have a pattern of doing this before, or for other reasons that whether you're burnout or not, are not the most enticing, the most getting people on your side style reasons. It's just, I understand where she's coming from, but it's definitely you can't fully see exactly what she's trying to accomplish here, I don't think.
Well, they haven't even come out and gave a reason why.
Yes, that's true. We don't really totally know. Like, and this documentary, the one thing it did add insight to me is, and it's a little whitewashed, WWE style version of the story, but Sasha says, like, I was really tired, I was exhausted, I was burnt out, I didn't like wrestling anymore, and that contributed to the last walkout. So it wasn't just they took the belts off Bayley and I was threw a fit and walked out. Like, maybe that was the inciting incident, but I believe her to a large extent that she was just tired of wrestling and needed to recharge. Like, that seems much more reasonable, and it seems like a combination of the two makes sense then. So I do want to believe there's something else going on here, right?
Maybe,
you'd assume?
Maybe. Like,
we don't know. That's what we should say. As of this time in the record, we really have, all we know is the scraps that everybody else sort of knows.
The parallels are certain there is when WWE's booking committee / Vince McMahon make rash decisions with regards to this women's tag team championship. It always ends in Sasha getting really, really upset, apparently, because that was kind of the onus for the last walkout. I mean, outside of other stuff that they explained in this quote-unquote doc, but...
Yeah, it seemed like the wrestling reason behind it was ill treatment, dumb, short-sighted treatment of the women's tag belts. But there's women are certainly more mistreated in wrestling and more disregarded and easily, pushed to the side than men. But the U.S. title is ill-treated all the time. Like, there's just, WWE just ill-treats everybody, Like, it doesn't make it any less frustrating, I'm sure. But, again, join the club of, like, you're being jerked around, you're being ignored, your ideas that seemed good a month ago are now just canceled for no reason. Like, it does seem like just the pitfalls of working for that company, and has been for decades. Like, even old man Vince is probably more annoying than young Vince, but if young Vince still pulled the rug out from under people and jerked them around, like, it's just, I don't know. It's you think that part of me is like, what you're getting into, so are you really complaining? And part of me is like, okay, that does sound really stupid and awful, and I get why sometimes you might want to just hit the road.
we're really dancing around a lot of things. I mean, like, I'm not trying to call us out on that, but it's really hard to I feel like anyone who has like a definitive opinion, like this is how I feel about this thing. It's like, wow, way to take a really gray thing and just turn it black and white. It's like, I have strong feelings, but then like those have changed 10 times since like every time I see something new, I change it. Yep. I mean, like ultimately though, it's like for any reason that the current reasons why, like, oh, I was supposed to have a title match at WrestleMania and it was given to Ronda. I mean, like, or, oh, they wanted us to do jobs and the tag titles are meaningless, or, oh, I'm just generally fucking unhappy at my placement of the card and other people, and I'm tired of getting overlooked and I don't need this shit. It's like, I look at this and it's like, wow, like if I was Naomi, I would walk out. But like Sasha she's always been in the title pick. She was main evented WrestleMania the year before.
Yep. The most well-regarded, beloved match on the card. Everyone thought it was incredible.
I think if she was to stick around long enough, she would find herself back in the main event of WrestleMania potentially again next year, or Hell in a Cell, or whatever. And so, like, I just think in Sasha's case, it's easier to find holes in any explanation that's been offered because of her standing in the company. And like, so it's almost painted as like this short-sighted temper tantrum every time she's unhappy. And whether that's true or not, it's like, maybe I can't tell someone how they feel, but like this person main evented WrestleMania last year. So I can't necessarily get behind the idea that like she's like underutilized, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's why it's so complicated too. And we'll move off this quick soon and go to the actual documentary. But it's WWE slanders you every time you do this, and I understand why they do, because you're under contract. You somewhat publicly embarrass them, and they go scorched earth, and that's understandable to a certain extent. I also will almost always side with the performer over the company on something like this, because the company is big and shitty and exhausting and a monolith and just, and has a history of not treating its, employees very well. They're not even employees, so there's reason enough right there. But yeah, the Sasha story though is the Stone Cold, it comes up a lot when people talk about this. Stone Cold walked out a few times. Stone Cold was tough to deal with, and like Vince said some real shitty things. Vince basically acted like Stone Cold was the biggest bastard in the entire world. The guy who just made him hundreds of millions of dollars years beforehand. When Stone Cold takes his ball and goes home, Vince just rips him apart on live TV. Like Vince has no qualms about taking you down if you cross him in some way. So, and that just, you never know the truth. It colors the situations. Like you said, it's really not black and white. Like it's a complicated thing, and we'll probably never really know the full story. But the Sasha story does that. One thing I will say about this doc, to give it some credit, if you haven't guessed, we didn't really love it, but they do show a passionate performer who really cares about her work and throws herself into it probably too much. Like, she gets hurt a lot. She's real small. Like, it's amazing she's been able to stay functional as long as she has, and she cares a lot. And it's that seems like a recipe for disaster, because wrestling will chew you up and spit you out, or at least wear you down to as far as it can go. So like this does seem sort of inevitable, that she would bump into some situation where she just doesn't want to deal with it anymore, and gets frustrated and has to take a break. Like I do understand that a little more, hearing her talk and knowing where she came from and how she sort of looks at the business.
Yeah, I think the injury aspect of it too kind of highlights more of the frustration that is never really talked about, because we were revisiting the documentary presents a very like vague explanation of why she was frustrated and walked out, or not even walked out. She just asked for her release or time off, and she was given a few months to kind of just like reset. But what led up to that is like, oh, poor poopy baby was crying in the locker room after her tag title loss in WrestleMania. It's like, get over it. It's a work. And like, that's when you hear about that story, it's like, it's it's hard not to feel that way. It's like, okay, you lost a fake fight that you were determined to lose. So sorry. But I did a little more digging. It's like I found an article that she did recently for The Atlantic about that. I mean, it was about a big profile, and I think it was to help push this documentary, which is kind of hilarious. But they talked about how, like, oh, well, in January of the year, they made the women's tag titles. It was like, well, Bayley and Sasha will win them, and it'll be a big deal because they're two of our biggest stars. And, you know, she gets injured fighting Ronda Rousey, which is kind of hilarious, given the recent news and like why there's reports of her being upset about losing that spot to her. She like tears her shoulder wrestling this non-wrestler, and then she fights through it. She hides it because it was like, well, I don't want to lose my spot. I don't want to lose this opportunity to like do something fucking important and historic. And then like they win the tag titles, and it's supposed to be this like big deal, and then like a month later they're losing to the Iconics on a like day of decision on a whim that Vince makes. It's like I would be pretty frustrated too. Like I fought through a legitimate shoulder injury and what was ended up becoming diagnosed as depression to like only be jerked around effectively. And it's like, yeah, that is a big part of this too. Like, I mean, that's a whole element of like CM Punk's unexpected departure from before, which was like the major one before Sasha. Like if you're doing this, even in the best case scenario, is frustrating when you're fucking hurt and still doing this, and then you're getting jerked around by creative decisions that don't make sense. I'm sure that's a level of frustration that is just like astronomical.
Yeah, it gets too easily boiled down by so many people, like you said, in that sort of black and white way of it's theater, bro. Like you get pinned, no cares. It doesn't matter. You'll get it back. And that's all true in like the most abstract sense, you know. Like yes, that is technically how the job works. But there's, like you said, there's planning that goes into this. There's you know, so many conversations. There's hours, days, weeks, months of building to something. There's your own internal frustrations. There's your own personal life. There's balancing all of these elements and trying to stay functional, stay happy, stay productive. Your career is limited. You only have a certain amount of time to be out there doing your thing. So to have someone pull the rug out from under you, even if it is predetermined, fake-ass pro wrestling, of course you're going to get upset. People get upset at dumber jobs for lesser things. You know, this is stuff on broadcast TV that you're a famous borderline pro athlete, performer, like, you know, well-known public entity, and you're getting jerked around, dumb things are happening, you're frustrated. Like, yeah, it's very reductive to be like, just take the L, take the pin because it doesn't matter. Like, of course it matters. Like, you don't get into wrestling not caring about your storyline, your character, how it's gonna go. Like, how would you even get this far if you didn't care about those things?
Especially when you have a successful character like Sasha Banks. I mean,
yeah.
Like, you know, the good thing about, we'll bring it back to this documentary now. The good thing about this is like being reminded of all these like huge moments this woman had in her career. And like the one I can't help but keep thinking about is like, I can't remember which WrestleMania it was. It was WrestleMania 34 or 36.
It doesn't matter at this point.
The one where it was like her and Charlotte and Becky in a triple threat match for the women's title, and it's like she comes out with Snoop Dogg singing her to the ring, her cousin Snoop Dogg, which I was also reminded of during this documentary because Snoop Dogg was one of the guests, which makes sense.
Snoop Dogg does a lot for Sasha, WWE related too. Like he really, you know, helps her out and makes those appearances. Like it's very nice of him.
No, yeah, I mean,
it's a huge deal, and he's like, and he pushes, and like I like up you're probably getting to when he shows up with her, that's a big deal too.
Yeah, I mean, she just looked like the biggest star in the world. And I still look at her like she's one of the biggest stars in the world. And I'm not sure why they didn't have her, why they jobbed her that night. She looked so much more of a star than any woman on that roster at that moment. But like, you know, just revisiting those moments and remembering all these huge moments in NXT and main roster that she had. Also, well, I'll get into the Snoop Dogg element later.
Okay. But you're very right, though. Like I said at the top, like the one thing this did remind me is she is incredibly accomplished. Like she's been around for a very long time, and she's one of the most beloved and well-regarded female wrestlers ever, maybe at this point, which is great, and I think very well deserved, and adds fuel to both sides of the argument we're talking about. Like what women have ever been better than Sasha? Not many, so you should be so happy that how well they've pushed you. At the same time, you're so well regarded, everybody loves you, and then you get jerked around in your tag titles match, or you spend years being sort of maybe not being as big as you could be, maybe just being a little on that cusp. Of course, you're going to be very frustrated. So that's why I do like at least this topic. I don't like Evil. Again, we'll make that clear. Evil does not seem like a good. We were gonna watch more episodes than just Sasha. We ended up just focusing on Sasha because we knew there was plenty here for an episode. But I do not want to watch any more episodes of Evil. Like maybe we will out of necessity or laziness or a need for content at some point. But it does not seem like a groundbreaking, unique series. It's the same old thing. But I do like Sasha's story because there's just not many. There's really not many great heel female characters either. Like who are wrestlers, like who have embraced that side of the equation. Like it's just not usually how it goes. Like Charlotte's been this weird tweener forever. Becky, has had a surprisingly good little heel run for 6 months, but everyone still loves Becky. Like they're playing along with the idea that you got to boo her now because she's a bad guy. But she's not dastardly so much as she's just like become more Seth Rollins poopy baby annoying. Like she's adopted that persona. But Sasha. This does do the parts of this that do sort of work are when they show how well Sasha the great times where she's leaned into the idea that I'm this Eddie Guerrero style jerk who will do whatever it takes and be mean to babies and just be actually a bad character. And I think that is she does that stuff really, really well, way better than a lot of women have, I think, in the last couple decades.
Yeah, I think that her NXT work that established this whole boss persona, like, yeah, that is one of the better, like, female villains. I just feel like ever since she came to the main roster, it was like she was like an NXT standout, and like the crowd was never gonna like boo her, even in her worst iteration. Like they were trying to make like these like really loose points. Like, oh well, when she did this, she was like really villainous. I'm like, not really. People were still pretty into it, and no one really had an issue with it. But like, yeah, making Izzy cry.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, right? That's like that's the premiere moment. That's basically what this documentary is all about. Is one time she literally made fun of a kid until she cried.
But like overall, I don't even think of the Sasha boss gimmick as like evil though. It's like,
yeah, I mean,
it's
evil
more
is
cool,
the stupidest.
It has attitude than anything else.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and that has been the laments of bad guys and in wrestling for the last post NWO. Is it became very hard to be, or most people just at least did not want to be a bad guy of the sort that actually got booed. You wanted to be cool. You wanted to have tude. And I get that, but it is nice to have, and rare and nice to have a bad guy who is truly a bad person that you actually actively dislike. You're not playing along with the show you're watching. You're going, I don't like you. Like I like the stories we've talked about on the show with Freddie Blassie and when Keith L.A. Greenberg, friend of the show, was on, people wanting to literally stab him with a fork and like kill him because they hated him so much. That's not really a thing anymore.
No, I was surprised, but at the same time, I was surprised that they did an episode on Sasha at all. Like, because there's parts of the doc where it's like Charlotte felt more like a villain. She's entitled. She had like silver spoon, and you learn about Sasha's upbringing. It's like she really came from nothing. They didn't really talk about her brother at all, which I thought was an odd choice, but I guess maybe she didn't want to talk about her brother and his like medical condition. But like that just made me feel like, wow, what a shithead Charlotte is, and like I felt more sympathetic to her. But is that the kind of the opposite of how I'm supposed to feel when I'm watching a show called WWE Evil, and I'm supposed to like know how, like, I don't know. That was just a weird feel. Like, we're not necessarily achieving what we want with this concept in this moment.
I mean, I know I wrote down in my notes, I understand they have to bring up Charlotte because their feud is a very important feud in the sense that they've had lots of groundbreaking main roster women's matches that, and a sustained years long rivalry that most women don't get the chance to have. So it is extremely unique and historic in that regard. And they're both two, again, super decorated, super talented female wrestlers. Same time, they it seems like they've been wrong the whole time. Like, well, their good guy bad guy personas shift a lot. Like either they're tweeners or Charlotte's good then she's bad, Sasha's good and then she's bad. Like it hasn't been like a fully defined, like Cena Orton I think of as a modern example. Like Cena's obviously the good guy and Orton's the bad guy 99% of the time, especially when they're feuding. So when you look back at that feud, whatever you think of it, you're like, okay, there's a clear good guy and a clear bad guy, and that adds I think a little more legitimacy to their feud, is because you're like, okay, these characters are very clear cut and straightforward, and we know what's going on, and there's continuity there, so it all sort of flows over the years. With the Charlotte Sasha, like Sasha should have been the good guy for a lot of that, and Charlotte should be getting a heels episode, an evil episode, because Charlotte should have been a bad guy for the last decade. Yeah, Charlotte shouldn't be on heels. Well, she can be on heels if she wants. Stars probably would love to have her, but she should be on evil because she should have been a bad guy from second one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like if they were smart, they'd lean into it. But and also I have to bring this up because it's just going to bother me without talking about this. What is the dynamic with Snoop Dogg and Sasha Banks? Because like it sounded like with her upbringing, like they struggled financially, and then cut to like she's 15 or something going to WrestleMania with Snoop Dogg. It's like, did they not talk for a long time? Like were the families estranged? Like is it kind of like a really, really loose thread? Like I've always been curious, like to understand, like why didn't she use Snoop Dogg to like become famous? Like, because that's what you do to become like WWE, to get like noticed by WWE. Like I also understand the rub of like not doing that too, because like a lot of celebrities get famous and suddenly your cousins from Sheboygan are like, hey, do you have a handout for me? But like, I just don't understand the fullest extent of like what this relationship truly is, I guess.
Yeah, it is. Whenever they talk about it, they never go beyond that Mania where he brought her to WrestleMania. Like, so it didn't seem like they really, but there's a big age difference maybe, and Snoop was also very famous and very young and probably just doing his thing. Maybe he didn't give a shit about his random cousin from Boston, and then she turned, got a little older, and he was like, all right, you seem like more of an adult now, like, oh, you like wrestling, like, maybe it was just a weird, family thing, but it is like, there's no pictures of Snoop and Sasha when they're like babies hanging out, like it is right, like, yeah. Snoop is 40 years old and Sasha's 20, and all of a sudden they were taking pictures with Chris Jericho backstage at Mania. So it is a weird. I mean, he seems fully committed now to helping her in whatever way he can, but it isn't like they were. Yeah, like he's been a presence in her life since day zero. It does not seem to be the case.
No, and that's totally. I'm not judging that. I just never quite know, and I don't know. Like, it just raises questions when you're learning about their struggle, Sasha Banks' family struggles early on. It's like, well, I guess Snoop wasn't that in the picture then.
Yeah, Snoop wasn't. Snoop didn't seem like he was sending checks to Iowa City or whatever, to help the family out. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is fine. It is just weird. It feels like there's chunks of the story missing, probably on purpose because it doesn't all fit together, or it just isn't really relevant, which is fine. But it is. I do notice that sometimes. I wonder what the deal is exactly. So you're not wrong.
And you'd hope in a series like this you would learn more about that, but you don't really do that.
Well, and that's why we got to talk about evil, like as a concept, right? Like what this show is. Like I crossed my fingers before this came out, before we watched it, that they were going to do what we like them to do for the most part, and drop kayfabe and like talk about the concept of being a bad guy, of being a villain in professional wrestling. They don't really do that at all. Like you've seen a little more than I have, but like I just from what I've read and what you've told me and what I gleaned from certainly this episode, it's like we said, it's the same as anything else. It's a docuseries. It might as well be Chronicle. It might as well be 24. It's just like it it doesn't, they do drop kayfabe a little bit, I guess. Mostly they drop it, which is nice. Like, I suppose, like throwing us a bone there by trying to be real. But I don't know what I expected from it. I'd probably not. What I'm describing is probably not enough to sustain a 40-minute episode, a 6-episode, 8-episode series anyway. But I just really hoped it was going to be something different. I hoped like they were going to whatever this weird John Cena bad guy centric show was going to have a hook to it that was a little different, and it doesn't. It's the same old stuff.
To clarify, Cena is producer and narrator.
Producer and narrator, yes. It seems like
we're not implying that John Cena is a subject for the show.
No, John Cena also ironic, obviously, then as well, that the guy who never turned heel and probably never will at this point is doing the evil show.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, that aside, it's curious why he's producing content for the network when he could be making millions doing an HBO Max spinoff. But like, I don't know. Maybe he has some free time. But yeah, I don't know why this exists. But I think if Cena wants to create a series for the network that has this call of his like cool celebrity friends like Mario Lopez and Dr. Phil to chime in and talk about Sasha Banks, Hollywood Hogan.
We should reiterate that if you haven't watched this series, Dr. Phil is involved, and Mario Lopez is in the Hogan episode, right?
Correct. Yeah.
For no reason. Like there's a Saved by the Bell reboot tie-in with Mario Lopez. Dr. Phil is I'm not like it doesn't say like Dr. Phil star of Peacock series XYZ. Like it just says Dr. Phil, and he's talking like he's lightly explaining the concept of being like a bad guy, right? Like he's like, you have personas and you show your darker self. Like he's trying to be like real, and it's I don't understand what that's trying to accomplish.
I don't know. Maybe John Cena called in a favor from his best friend Dr. Phil and celebrity. I also suspect that maybe Peacock is like, hey, we need more of our other properties in this because otherwise, then the wrestling fans are going to watch the dumb wrestling content, and then our Saved by the Bell reboot fans are only going to watch the Saved by the Bell reboots, and there's going to be zero cross-pollination, and why did we spend millions of dollars on this? So
I really hope Evil didn't cost I guess it must cost $1 million, but I hope it didn't cost millions, plural.
Well, I'm saying the WWE network
that's true.
Millions a year.
Yes, the content machine must keep humming for sure.
Right. So, I mean, there's all this, of course, speculative, but I mean, I guess if John Cena wants to do a biographical docuseries for the network, we're just gonna say sure, and then here's what we can talk about in it's gonna be the same shit though.
Yeah, it's just the other episodes are like Hogan, Miz, Orton, and I'm like, what that's part of the reason we didn't do the full series. We've talked about so many of these people already in so many different contexts. Like there's no way the Miz episode has anything to say that we didn't learn from like the 3 other Miz centric docuseries episodes that we've either watched or covered on the show. Like there's no more Miz to talk about. There's nothing there.
Unless the Miz walks out next week, then there'll be a reason to watch this and talk about it. But like, frankly, that's the only reason why we did the Sasha one, was because of real life
outside external
real time happening, and it just so happens that we were just going to do this. So otherwise, we would have been talking about your boy Terry right now. So.
I will say there's a Roman Reigns episode that I don't think is going to be good, but we also have not talked a ton about Roman Reigns, so maybe someday we'll consider that. But well, what's your overall take on Evil after watching this? After watching a little of season 1, where are your thoughts at?
I didn't see anything that is too different from other content, but I mean, like, picture value is as good as any of the other ones, but like,
I think better too. I think it looked like they put a little like it didn't feel like it was just talking head wrestling clip. It feels like they tried a little more. Obviously, the other talking heads is different and not in a good way, but it felt like they tried to fill the voids a little more this time with like something that might have, like we said, a little more not mainstream appeal, but like it just didn't feel so wrestling-y, and it was only aimed at wrestling fans. It feels like there's a little bit of an effort here to try and mainstream it a tad.
Yeah, but like the nuances are are the differences, and then, like, if you squint hard enough, like, it's just 24.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
and if
it's
you've
really not different.
the only way you would know it was any more broad is if you'd seen Chronicle and 24, and you're like, oh well, this is slightly less in the weeds than those shows. But to the undiscernible, to the non-informed eye, you'd be like, this is a wrestling show. Who cares?
It's more of the same, so don't get too excited.
No, don't. Again, if you want to learn more about Sasha, if you're intrigued by all this going on and you want to get a little bit of background, it's there. It's only 40 minutes. I'll give it credit for that. It's not taking up a ton of your time, but I have to say it's not a treat, Walt.
Wow.
I did not have a sweet taste in my mouth when I watched it. I did not lick my fingers. I did not have any sort of positive feelings after watching this episode of Evil. So.
And I don't blame you. I mean, the Sasha story is great, but did that have to be WWE Evil? Could that have been 24 Chronicle? I don't know, but at this point, it's all the same grab bag of branding.
Yep.
To tell the same story.
It's content for the sake of content. It's creating for the sake of having a new symbol on a graphic on a page that implies that there's new information there, but there's not. We've seen so many of these things. We're kind of also. Walt, we should honestly be talking heads on this show. Like the level of random ass people in the Sasha episode in particular. I'm like, I don't know who these people are. They don't have any sort of name value to me whatsoever. Like you could put Steve Semino, Walt Schwank, co-host Awesome Truth podcast. It would be almost as valid as whoever these people are. So I'm a little offended that we didn't get the call to come do this.
They're journalists.
Yeah, well, so am I. I'm literally a journalist in real life.
Yeah,
You're a producer. I'm a journalist. Like we have the same credibility that these people do.
Well, for season 2 of this or any other doc series,
we
can
be bought. I think you'd find our opinions on Evil swing, way in the positive if they give us a call. So
wait for John Cena to give us a call.
Yeah.
EP John Cena.
John, if you're listening, you have obviously some time to kill if you're making Evil. So please find us on social media and let us know. And you should do the same if you're enjoying this episode. If you're an Awesome Truth fan, if you want more, you can find our archives at awesometruth.libsyn.com. You can subscribe to us everywhere podcasts are delivered: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. We are found there. Please subscribe. Please review, all those good things. And, of course, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at AwesomeTruthPod. Walt, a treat to talk Sasha with you, even if we did not. Yeah, even if the episode itself and the series itself was not a sweet treat. The talking to you always is, and let's cross our fingers that in the 2 weeks in between this recording and this episode being released, some seismic events don't occur that instantly negate everything we just talked about.
And if they do, you'll be on your honeymoon, and this will be days after your very wrestling themed wedding. Not really, but yeah, go enjoy it, and hopefully we'll see what comes of all this, because I have no idea where any of this ends up.
Yep.
For Sasha Banks, that is.
Well, I'll find out at some point, Walt. But for now, thank you all so much for listening. And remember, the truth will set you free.